What if I told you Trixter went gold, played stadiums, and still got dumped like dead weight the second the label smelled change? No gimmicks, just songs, sweat, and hustle. Then one day, mid-album, the plug got yanked. Here's how that went down.
Like, subscribe, thank you.
Trixter didn't start in a bar. They started in a Paramus basement in 1983. Steve Brown was 12. Doug Cowie was right there with him. Just two kids writing songs in Steve's parents' place, calling themselves Raid. The real shift came when Steve overheard Pete Loran on the phone messing around on the guitar. Steve asked him to sing, and that was it. Pete was in. Mike Payne came in and played the drums, and Mark Gus Scott stepped in, and the lineup was there. Raid became Trixter, and the goal got bigger. By 1986, they had a raw demo and a growing reputation on the Jersey and New York club circuit. Packed rooms, tight harmonies, real hooks. They were less riding a trend and more just purely building a name, and that's when things started moving. By 1987, Trixter had a tighter, louder demo and a growing buzz. They weren't just hometown heroes anymore. They were packing clubs, opening for Kicks, swapping slots with Skid Row, and sharpening their set with every show. No more was it practice. It was pure momentum, and the industry was starting to notice. In 1988, they took a real shot, booked time at Bear Track Studios, and started recording a full album called Just Having Fun. Now, this one never saw a release, but the sessions actually leveled them up. The songs stuck, and so did the progress. And then came a shakeup. Founding bassist Dougie C stepped out, 16-year-old PJ Farley stepped in, young, seasoned, and instantly locked in. And the lineup was now totally set. So by 1989, Trixter wasn't just buzzing, they were totally breaking. Word was out, shows were packed, labels were circling, and in May, MCA Records made it official. No more basements, no more almosts, they're actually officially in now. And with the deal locked and the spotlight creeping in, Trixter headed west. September 1989, Hollywood. The band hit the studio to track their official debut with producer Bill Ray at the helm. They weren't starting from scratch. Some of the best cuts from Just Having Fun were pulled off the shelf and given this fresh coat of polish. Ride the Whip, Only Young Once, songs that lived through the basement sessions and club stages were now getting the full studio treatment. This was no longer a demo, it was actually the real thing, and the pressure was on to make it count. So Trixter dropped on May 29, 1990, and it landed like a firebomb. The debut album shot up to number 28 on the Billboard 200, fueled by relentless hooks, glossy production, and a look tailor-made for MTV. Momentum kept building. By early 91, the record had gone gold in the US, boosted by a high-profile set at MTV's Spring Break. In April, at a post-show party, the band was handed their gold record, proof that they had just arrived, not as players, but as full contenders as well. So they sold over 500,000 copies in the US, over 1 million worldwide. Definitely a great start for Trixter. And Trixter's debut started off really strong, thanks to a run of singles that lit up both radio and MTV. The first spark was Line of Fire, which hit rock radio hard, climbed to number 1 on Z-Rock's Top 100 in July of 90. The real breakthrough came next. Give It To Me Good turned into a full-blown anthem, cracked the Billboard Hot 100, peaking at number 65, and climbed to number 26 on the mainstream rock chart. But the real magic happened on TV. The video caught fire, landing at number 1 on MTV's Dial MTV and staying there for 5 straight weeks. Started as hype and became dominance. Trixter had arrived and they were definitely everywhere. And they weren't slowing down, they were stacking hits. 1 in a Million came next, landing at number 75 on the Billboard Hot 100. Its video took over MTV, locking down the number 1 slot for 3 weeks. Next came Surrender, another charting single, peaking at number 72. Another visual smash, number 1 on MTV for 2 weeks straight. And by the end of that run, their debut album had pumped out 3 top 50 hits and 3 separate videos that hit number 1 on MTV. The band faces were literally everywhere. Posters, interviews, countdowns. It got to the point you literally could not turn on MTV for a second without seeing them. And MTV didn't just make them famous, it also made Trixter a hot commodity on the road. September of 1990, they hit the highway, scoring a prime opening slot for none other than Stryper. A month later, they jumped tours and joined Don Dokken, putting them in front of even bigger crowds, hungry for hard rock. The timing was perfect. By January 91, their debut album wasn't just steady, it was exploding. Sales hit 20,000 units per week. The songs were everywhere, as were the faces. And now the band was everywhere too. Trixter's rise was amplified to arena scale. The first taste of that level came opening for Poison, stepping onto the massive stages for the first time. But the real leap happened right after. They locked in a 5-month North American tour with the Scorpions at the peak of Crazy World. Sold out crowds night after night. It It was the kind of exposure that bands coming up like this could only dream about. The tour did two things. It boosted their profile, and it also moved the records. And many credit those months with pushing that debut over the line to gold. Trixter had gone from basements to stadiums in under 2 years, and the machine was still in motion. February 1991, Trixter got the call that confirmed everything. They were booked for MTV's Spring Break in Daytona. It was like a concert, but also a televised stamp of approval. A huge showcase beamed straight into every teenage bedroom in America. And the rock press followed suit. Metal Edge went all in, devoting an entire issue to the band. The Trixter Color Spectacular. Full spreads, glossy photos, centerfold treatment. The kind of coverage reserved for royalty or somebody that everybody happened to want to see nude. And somehow, amid the touring, the press, and the TV appearances, they still found time to contribute to a film soundtrack. One Mo Time landed on If Looks Could Kill, putting Trixter on the big screen just as they were dominating the small one. All cylinders were firing at once. The fame was loud, fast, and everywhere. But underneath it, the industry was already starting to shift. During this time, Trixter was touring, living on this rock and roll fantasy on Fast Forward, across the US, Canada, Japan, playing to crowds as large as 35,000 night after night in arenas and amphitheaters that once felt untouchable. The lineup sheets read like a Hall of Fame induction. Kiss, Boston, Cinderella, Warrant, Slaughter, Winger, Skid Row, Firehouse, Ted Nugent, Night Ranger, Great White, Twisted Sister, plus all the heavy hitters there already joined: Poison, Scorpion, Stryper, and Dokken. For a bunch of kids from Paramus, it wasn't just surreal, it was the dream. On stage, under those big lights, shoulder to shoulder with the legends. But as the volume climbed, so did the pressure. And the storm brewing in the industry was about to change everything. And by October of 1991, the ride finally slowed. Trixter wrapped their massive tour cycle, stepping off the stage after a whirlwind year of arena crowds and gold records. And behind that curtain, the ground was shifting. The music world was turning fast and not in their favor. Grunge was emerging, labels were pivoting, and the appetite for melodic hard rock was drying up almost overnight. The Trixter had made it, but their timing, once perfect, was now a curse. The next chapter wouldn't be about climbing, it would be about surviving. January 1992, Trixter pushed forward, head down, full speed. They kicked off pre-production on their second album, unaware that the musical tide was already pulling away from everything they had built. There were signs of optimism. They renegotiated their deal, landing directly with MCA Records instead of one of its subsidiaries. Looked like a vote of confidence, and it felt like security. From April to August, they hunkered down in the studio with James Barton, a heavyweight producer with credits on albums by Queensryche and Rush. The album would be called Here, and for now, the plan was simple. Strike twice, hit harder. But the storm wasn't coming. It had already begun. Here dropped on October 13th, 1992, and it was Trixter's pivot point. They weren't chasing the same shiny pop metal gloss this time. The goal was clear. Shake off the bubblegum metal label and deliver something leaner, harder, and more grown up. And the title said it all, Here, as if daring critics and fans alike to actually listen. And the reaction? Split down the middle. The Indianapolis Star gave credit where it was due, pointing out real musical growth, but the Chicago Tribune wasn't buying the rebrand, calling the new sound forced, an awkward swing at toughness that didn't really quite land. Trixter had evolved, but by the time the album hit the shelves, the world had already moved on. And it really came down to the fact that this album hit the shelves and barely made a sound, peaking at number 109 in the Billboard 200. It moved just 100,000 units. A steep drop from their gold-certified debut, and worse, it came without a breakout single. No radio heat, no MTV traction, no anchor to hold on to. The timing could not have been worse. And with grunge now fully dominating the charts, Trixter's brand of rock, no matter how retooled, was pushed to the margins. Just a year earlier, they were headlining arenas and topping MTV, and now with one underperforming album, it was over. Just bam, full faceplant all the way. And the industry did not look back. But Trixter, well, they kept on fighting. They hit the road in support of Here, scoring an opening slot for Kiss on another North American tour, logging additional dates with Faster Pussycat. They pushed Road of 1,000 Dreams to radio, hoping for a spark, but it never caught. And by January of '93, they're shooting a video for Rocking Horse and launching their own club run, the Here Club for Men tour. Smaller venues, tighter crowds, no illusions. Japan showed them a lot of love. Like many hard rock bands of that era, they found a loyal following overseas even as the US scene was turning its back. but it wasn't enough. The Here tour wrapped by late June of 93, and with it the last real wave of Trixter's commercial run. And Trixter's downfall didn't come from within, it came from the outside, fast and unforgiving. 1992 marked the full-scale arrival of grunge. Nirvana, Pearl Jam, Soundgarden. Do I sound like a broken record? Yes, I do. But that's who hit. Bands that didn't just dominate, they friggin' rewrote the rules at this point. And suddenly, the polished sound and party gloss image of bands like Trixter were not just outdated, they're actually considered unwelcome by this industry. Total brutal shift. Labels actually reallocated budgets. Radio stations flipped formats. MTV dropped hair metal overnight and flooded the screen with flannel and feedback. And Trixter, with all those harmonies and hooks, just did not stand a chance. They were being erased, and they weren't alone. They were just among the first to go. We gotta remember, MCA had once fought to sign Trixter, and now they cut them loose without a second thought. Not even tour support, no budget, no second chance. Just in a few years, a major label had helped them launch, turned its back, and just totally walked away. But they regrouped in Steve Brown's home studio and recorded a full album of covers. It was a creative act, but also an act of survival. And the result was Undercovers, a stripped-down collection released on November 15th, 94, through the indie label Backstreet Records. Some listings called it Undercovers, Everything By, Nothing From, with a later date, but the release happened in real time, even if the world wasn't paying attention. And it was a defiant gesture, but not a resurrection. It barely made a ripple. Trixter was still fighting, but the stage they once ruled had just vanished. And the collapse? Inevitable. After Undercovers, the weight of a shrinking fan base and a hostile industry began to drag everything down. Mark, Gus, Scott left during what would have become their final tour. They tried to keep going with a new drummer, but the spark was gone. By 95, it was done. Trixter called it quits. The dream that had ignited in a New Jersey basement had burned out fast, bright, and now totally gone. After the split, Pete Lauren went solo. PJ Farley and Steve Brown kept the music going with 40-foot Ringo, chasing something new. Farley later landed a spot in the alt-rock band R.A. in 2002. But the name Trixter stayed dormant, at least for a while. And for over a decade, Trixter was just a memory. One more band lost in the rubble after the fall of an era. But the pull never faded. The music, the brotherhood, the unfinished story, it stuck around. And eventually it dragged them back in. On December 1st, 2007, Steve Brown announced it. Trixter was reuniting. The Give It To You Good tour was set for 2008. By the next year, the class-up lineup was locked. Pete, Steve, PJ, Mark. After 13 years apart, they came back swinging. 5 shows, one resurrection after another. Rocklahoma in July, sold out New Jersey homecoming in November. Fans were still there, and it was a nostalgia, and it was also a reset. In 2008, they dropped Live in Japan, sometimes listed as Alive in Japan, live record with 2 new studio tracks. A year later, they remastered Best of Hit Shelves. March 2009, they took the stage at the Crazy Donkey in Farmingdale, New York. Momentum building. I think I played there once back in the day. By 2012, they were done looking backward. They signed with Frontiers Music SRL and cut the new Audio Machine, the first all-new studio album since the early 90s, the least recorded by the full classic lineup. And Steve Brown wore that thing like a badge. Very few of their peers could say the same. And it put a fire under their butt. Their response to New Audio Machine gave them the push to keep going. And on June 15, 2015, they dropped Human Era, their second post-reunion album. Same lineup, sharper focus, bigger hooks, still melodic and tight and hungry. Trixter's rise was pure explosion. 4 Jersey kids who rode hooks, grit, and MTV heat straight to the top. But when that tide turned, the machine didn't blink. Grunge reset the board. Labels ghosted them. MCA, once eager, cut the cord without a word. And their second album Here was that send-off. Talent intact, but the industry had moved on. No room for what they were or points for what they had done. But the story did not end in silence, and that band just keeps on rolling. Props to Trixter. To my subscribers, thank you so much, just for being awesome the way you are. If you haven't had a chance to subscribe yet, break out a bowl, pour some Trix in it, and some milk, take that subscribe button, chuck it in there, and eat the whole damn thing. And while you're at it, chuck in that like button as well, because it tastes extra good. Join the family, and I want to thank you so much for watching.